Hey, it's John Oast from Fishyaker.com. Welcome to the show. Today we have my old friend Juan Veruete from the Wilderness Systems Pro staff and the Hook One crew. So here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about kayak fishing road tripping.
Fishyaker.com, the original kayak rigging video series.
So Juan, thanks for coming on. You and I have known each other for a long time. We both live in Pennsylvania. We've both done a lot of traveling, tournaments, road trips, you name it. But you've done some really cool road trips over the years. So I thought, hey, this is a topic that, it'd be good to discuss how you prep, how you plan, and what you do when you hit the road. So Juan, tell us a little about some of the different types of road trips you've done over the years.
Yeah, sure. I've done quite a bit, actually. I've been to a lot of pretty notable rivers and great destinations that a lot of kayak anglers have really wanted to be on. I mean, I looked at that recent Kayak Angler magazine article about, the places to fish, and I've been to actually a number of those places, so I feel pretty lucky. I've been to the Devil's River in Texas, which is, pretty famous, I guess, in kayak fishing circles. I've been to the Flint River for shoal bass in Georgia, and then I've also spent some time on the same trip in Alabama fishing for spotted bass in the Coosa River chain.
Yeah.
Done that plus a whole lot of other stuff. Inside Pennsylvania, outside of Pennsylvania, I've done quite a bit, and most of my stuff is river fishing too. I love to fish the rivers.
Cool. Well, what do you do? How do you plan for a trip, especially if you're going to go, say, several hours away? What do you do to research it and to prep it, and what do you take?
Yeah, I think first of all, researching the place that you want to go is important. And I'll kind of talk about rivers because that's kind of what I do. But you can apply a lot of the things I look at, to lake situations too. The first thing I do is try to identify a body of water that I really am interested in, and a lot of that comes from just being on Facebook, being online, talking to anglers, seeing photographs of what guys are doing in their home states, and just kind of surfing the internet, and I'll come on this idea. That's how I thought about going to the Devil's River. It was just an idea that I was actually running one of my kayak fishing boot camps. And we sat down one evening after we were spending some time on the river, learning some things. And, we popped up that video that somebody did on the Devil's River. And I was like, okay, I want to go there. And so we actually planned to go, a year from that point, and we ended up doing it. So, looking around, just seeing what kind of waters you'd like to fish, and how do I want to say this? It's, I like to, go places that are a little bit off the beaten path. Personally, I like to go places that would present some type of a challenge, fishing in the kind of swampy rivers of the Coosa chain at times and dealing with all the snags and logs. I mean, that stuff is fun. It's like a little adventure, you know what I mean? Even if you're close to people and towns and things like that. Right. Now, the Devil's River was really a remote trip when I did it several years ago. So that was kind of out there kind of thing. But you can have an adventure any place. And really what I do is look for quality fishing, look for the environment I'm going to fish in. Is it really a cool river with a lot of cool features, bluffs and so I'm really looking at the total package when I decide to go someplace. Make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, and I know you like the Devil's River trip. I remember we talked at the time about budgeting. How'd you do it without like blowing your budgets out of the water?
Yeah, that was actually funny because that was a big trip, and I was kind of in charge of figuring out the budget. And I looked at several different options: flying out, shipping gear out, because at that time there was really no place for us to get what I would consider good quality gear to do the trip. And so we really had to have our own camping gear. I felt like I really wanted my own fishing gear with me, and I really wanted my own boat with me. And so what I did is kind of said, okay, can we ship it out? What's the cost of that? Where would we ship it to? Those kind of logistics, and then what are the plane ticket prices like? And what's your travel like, your staying overnight, your food costs. So I calculated all that stuff a couple different ways. And actually, it's kind of funny because I came to the conclusion after pricing everything out, the way that we did that trip, we literally pitched in to rent a motorhome and drove that rented motorhome, 1,700 miles one way, and then back another 1,700 miles, because it actually saved us costs in terms of staying overnight in hotels and so forth. We actually drove in shifts. We didn't stop driving only for gas on the way out for 1,700 miles. Literally, we had 4 people on the trip. 2 people would drive. There would be a co-pilot for 4 hours and the driver for 4 hours. They would switch another 4 hours. The guy would sit and keep them up or whatever you had to do. And then the other guys were in the motorhome eating and sleeping and just hanging out. It was actually really cool. We had a trailer with all of our kayaking gear and camping gear on it. We had plenty of groceries in there, and that's how we made the trip. We did not stop once on the way down. We did not stop once on the way back, other than just to get gas and stretch our legs, and we didn't really need to do that because we were in a motorhome. And that actually costed out to be actually a pretty decent cost, split among 4 people with the gas and your food costs and things like that. Plus, we had our own gear, so we didn't have to rent gear and worry about those kind of costs. So it actually made it cheaper than flying out and shipping gear. So that was a really cool trip. Really, it was pretty awesome.
So if you're traveling with a group of guys like that, how much stuff you can take, I'm sure, is vital. How many rods did you take with you?
When I go on trips, it depends on how remote the trip is, and how rough the water is, and how difficult it is to navigate. So the Devil's River has some good rapids, and so I tried to keep my rod selection down to 3. I'd probably keep 2 on the boat with me all times out, and then I put an extra rod in the boat in case there was an accident of some type. I'd have 1 rod on reserve that wouldn't be broken or lost in the water or something like that. And so I tried to think about those kind of things. I think that when you're looking at your gear, whether it's a remote trip like we did on the Devil's River, or it's going to the Coosa River chain like I did last year, which really was not a remote trip, what I do is I planned a base camp. Meaning I had all the, nice camping, the big tent, and, I want to be comfortable. So, I have the air mattress and, the little, screened awning thing. And then I also plan to do, like, if I'm going to do overnight on the river, I take I scale it down to backpacking gear.
Right.
And that's what I take in my kayak. Literally my pillow, my sleeping bag, and my sleeping pad fit into a dry bag about this big, and that's it. And so it's high tech, it's high end stuff that costs money. But when you're doing trips like that, and you're going to do them, which I do usually a trip like that, every year. I went for a week and a half and last year and did the like I said, the Coosa River chain, not the Coosa River, but some of the other rivers that run into it. And then I also did the Flint River in Georgia.
Right.
And so what I needed was some small camping gear to take, and then I needed some gear for base camp, so to speak, so I could be a little bit comfortable and get a good night's rest once in a while. When you're traveling with other anglers, that's where you coordinate your list. And one of the things that I did when I traveled with the other anglers is that we actually made a gear list and ran through all the things that we would need to do our camping. And, and I'm not going to go into those details. You can get gear lists off the internet all the time and then tailor it to your use. But you want to compare your gear list. And if there's gear that everybody doesn't have to bring, then you just, you have a designate, this guy's going to bring a stove, a cook stove, for, a long trip. This guy will bring a backup stove. If it's like the Devil's River trip was 4 days plus. And so, we had to have some backup stuff too. One guy had a really, one of the guys on the trip was actually a professional, EMT, firefighter. And so he brought his medical kit with him because that was a big deal on the Devil's River, because it really is a pretty rugged river. And, if something happens, help is not, half an hour away. So, right. You'll be waiting a little bit. So, comparing your notes with the other anglers to make sure you have the right things. as far as your camping gear is really important, because it can lighten the loads in your kayak, because you should take as little gear as you need to sustain yourself over that time. Water is a big deal too. You've got to have water. If you don't have an adequate water supply that you can tap into, and so water is a big deal when you're spending multiple nights on the river. And that's a big thing too, to be able to haul enough water. Luckily, some of the big fishing kayaks are pretty roomy inside, so you can fit a lot of water inside the hulls, and it works out pretty well. I think the biggest thing is the fishing part, though. Preparing to fish a piece of water you've never seen before. You make that decision to go to this awesome spot, awesome place that you've never been before. You're totally psyched to do it, but you've never been there. Maybe there's more or less information about it, and that was really the struggle. And so what I do when I travel to a river is, number one, I try to obviously scan the internet and search to see if I can find some fishing reports from that river. And it does get tough, because some of the places I went in Alabama, they're off the beaten path, man.
Yeah.
They weren't places that a lot of people are fishing or have will take the time to go into. And we caught a lot of really, really big spots too, so it was a ton of fun. What I typically will do is search around the internet for reports. A big resource for me, honestly, has been the fish commissions, or whatever the entity is in that state that controls the fisheries. They tend to do a lot of research. The biologists doing research on the river. For example, when we were going to the Devil's River, I literally found a piece of research that was done by a biologist that studied the stomach contents of the bass on the Devil's River. Talk about a boon, man, because you get to see what the forage is, what they're eating, what's the most common thing that's found in their stomachs. And what I did then is took that information, and then I made a tackle bag, honestly, that was, because it's a multi-day trip, you got to have room for your gear. There's a very small tackle bag, and I had what I felt confident was the stuff that was going to work. And like any trip, you want to try to, when in doubt, mimic what's in the water. That's going to be your best thing to do. So look at those biologist reports. I've even used what they call a Google Scholar, because it has research. Again, it has research on there that may not be on the Fish Commission sites. And so you can go to Google Scholar and search, smallmouth bass in the blah, blah, blah river, in the, Flint River, or shoal bass in the Flint River research. And you can find a lot of great data that can help guide you in terms of the lures that you want to take with you. They're going to match the hatch, so to speak. So that's a big one. Now, on top of that, though, quite honestly, sometimes I want to do things a little bit different too. And so I will make sure that even though I'm mimicking that stuff that's in that river chain that I'm going to visit, that I also want to take some things that I like, that I have confidence in, because usually, I'm talking about bass, smallmouth, shoal bass, largemouth bass, spots, and there are a lot of similarities between those species in terms of what they're going to hit and so forth. And so, I'm going to make sure that I also cover the water column. So it's not just like crankbaits and things like that. I want to get a buzz bait in there, or some kind of prop bait in there. I want to get, or walk the dog bait, and again, we're just a couple of each thing. I'm not going to go nuts with colors. Something I can work the bottom really slow if I have to. And that actually happened to us on the Devil's River. We had a really big cold front go through for a couple of days, and we ended up really going low and slow on the bottom and catching a ton of fish. I think we stopped counting after the second day. We had over 250 fish caught, and that's going low and slow in a cold front condition in Texas. And so, have some stuff for the bottom, have some stuff you can work in the middle of the water column, and then you're pretty much set. But use that basic research that you find online, to guide your choice of lures and so forth. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's cool. The thing I'd also talked about the other day, we're talking, thinking a little bit also on the traveling side of it. You guys use a trailer. I mean, you and I, when I travel, I'm a Southern boy, and I grew up saltwater, but I've transitioned in Pennsylvania more to the freshwater side. But what is your gut feeling when you're traveling, say trailering versus car topping? and any experience. Well, when I think back, I'm just saying the reason I bring that up is because I grew up saltwater with power boats, and my biggest fear to this day is blowing a bearing out on a trailer when I'm in the middle of nowhere or I'm on the interstate. So I don't know if you've ever had, what your gut feeling, how your feeling is on that.
Yeah, when we went to Texas, we trailered the kayaks and gear. When I went to Alabama to fish, I trailered last year. When I went to, then we flipped over to the Flint River, I trailered as well. And I really like the trailer my kayaks because you can also have room for gear in the trailer as well. So it's more stuff that you can carry along with you, more gear you can pack. And so I do trailer. When I trailer, though, I make sure that I have, make sure my trailer's in great working condition before I leave. If, you have bearings that need to be greased, you grease the bearings, you check the lights, you go through and check, I check the nuts and bolts on my trailer to make sure everything's okay because, we're going, hundreds of miles or 1,000 miles when we do these trips, and you want to make sure everything's good. Lighting is a huge thing with trailers.
Yeah.
Never seems to ever work quite right all the time. And so, extra bulbs, I actually always, I have a, in my console, my Jeep, I have extra bulbs, like 2 sets of bulbs for each light in my trailer that I take with me on these trips. Making sure that you're not overloading your trailer, that you pay attention to the weight capacities is real important because you could be tempted to put more gear on there if you're making a long trip. You want to make sure you pay attention to those kind of things. Having an extra tire in case you get a flat. I always have an extra spare.
You carry a snow shovel?
What's that?
You carry a snow shovel?
I do not. No. No. I just plow through the snow, man. I don't worry about that.
Yeah, how'd that work out for you in January?
That was perfect. I borrowed a shovel that time. But it was really, when I'm using my trailer, I really try to pay attention to, the working condition of the trailer when I'm traveling that far. And I also take a lot of tools with me too. Basically, I take every tool that I would need to take that trailer apart. Honestly, that's what I do. Every tool that I would possibly need to take that trailer completely apart is going to be in a toolbox that goes along with me. I think that's another important part. So in case you do break down, you have a problem, you have everything you need right there to fix it on the spot. How
about clothing when you travel?
Yeah, clothing is really important because it's it's just like it's almost like spending a day on the water, right? If you're really prepared, you're gonna it's depending on the time of the year, you're gonna dress in layers, no cotton, in the cooler months, those kind of things. You want to make sure that you bring your good rain gear, good quality rain gear. One of my buddies, we were on a trip, and literally he didn't bring his rain gear with him. So he ends up, finding an old garbage bag that we had along with us to camp and popping holes in it, that's a miserable way to spend 2 days of rain and camping and trying to fish. And so having good quality rain gear, I think, is a must when you're doing these kind of trips because you've gone to have a great time. You know what I mean? You've gone to really do something new that you haven't done before. And when I'm in that situation, I want to make sure that I have everything I need so that all I have to focus on is having a great time and getting out there, having fun and fishing, just relaxing, enjoying the scenery, enjoying the fish, and so I don't want to be out there miserable. So I make sure that I have, good layers of clothing with me, everything I need for the season, and then some, and definitely some good quality rain gear is important.
Very cool. I know we've been on probably about 20 minutes now. Just a few quick words, just general overview tips before we roll out. Anything you can think of, we really are important things we probably haven't touched on?
Yeah, I think a good trip really comes in the planning before you go. When I went to the Devil's River, there's 4 of us that went. We spent a year planning back and forth to do that trip, and it was real planning, looking at the costs, looking at the gear, looking at the lures we would take, and the types of fishing gear that we would need to effectively, fish in those waters. And, like any trip, the planning that you do ahead of time, the checklists you make, when I have trips, I have Google Docs, and I literally have a checklist when I'm going on a trip like that I've used and tailored and redone over the years, that I run through before I leave. Because once you forget something, there may not be the opportunity to buy it when you get there. And so I always make sure that I have all that gear. So I think planning is key. I think also realizing that you're there to have a great time and enjoy your time on the water. Sometimes folks get too caught up in, the planning and, and this and that and all this other stuff. I try to roll with the punches. The fun of it is when something happens, that's out of the ordinary. I mean, it's supposed to be fun. We had a hailstorm, like golf ball size hailstorms on the one trip I did with 3 other buddies, and it was a 4-day trip, and I mean, it was coming down. And, you could kind of, take a negative spin on that because it was a little miserable, but man, that was just an awesome experience. I mean, there was lightning and there was hail and there was like gloom and doom, man. I mean, it was something. I mean, but that's what you make those trips for, and you're also out there sharing it with your buddies. I know when I went to Alabama and Georgia to fish the rivers I fished there. I had my son, he flew in from California. We just had a fantastic time. Just kind of enjoying and kicking back and relaxing. Yeah, we're getting after the fish pretty hard. We love to fish, and we're out there to the, cast. But realizing you're there to have a good time and just kind of take things as they come, I think is my one thing I would say. The other thing is too, the internet is a wonderful thing and Facebook is a wonderful thing. And if you can link up with people who really know waters really well, that's another thing that we were talking about that a little bit before we, started recording and so forth, John. You've done that before, we've all kind of done that. But man, that can be invaluable, because those are folks, if they're really top-notch anglers. I know when I went to Alabama and fished, Tim Perkins is on the wilderness team, and that guy wins like all kinds of tournaments down there in the River Bassin Tour. I mean, he is just a top-flight angler. And, and I definitely leaned on him, and he actually was kind enough to come out, meet my son and I a few days in a row out there and just go out and fish. And he actually went over to Georgia with us and fished. And his knowledge was invaluable to being successful. I think that our preparation would have helped us be successful, but his just knowing the waters a little bit more, tweaking things a little bit more, knowing some of the patterns that were working really good that time of year really just bumped up our catch rate and the quality of the fish. I mean, we caught some really, really trophy spotted bass fishing with Tim out there. So, getting to know somebody, maybe linking up with some anglers, and that's always fun to make a new angling friend too. We spent the summer out there, and I definitely plan to go out again and enjoy some of that spotted bass fishing. Yeah, because those fish are like supercharged, man. Right, yeah. They're just, when they smack the lure, it's like a race car, man, on the end of your line. It's just a lot of fun. I thought, I love smallmouth bass fishing, and I still think they're the best fish, man. I'm biased, but man, those spotted bass, those river spots are a lot of fun, especially if it's like 19, 20 inches long, man. Those are barrel laughs, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I caught them long before I caught my first smallmouth.
Yeah, we and this is a funny story. We actually, when we fished for the spots, my son had on a really big one. I mean, that thing was bulldog, and the rivers we were fishing on and were deep and muddy. You couldn't see the bottom at all. Kind of like swamp rivers, And I was kind of messing with him, as dads will do. And he had this big fish on, so I slapped the paddle on the water a couple times, pulled up next to him, and the fish ended up diving straight down and probably into a jumble of logs down it. I mean, about 6 feet under the water. And Tim, he's a swamp guy, man. He's like one of those the swamp guys on the TV show. Literally, he comes out in his commander, he jumps out, and of course then I have to jump out because I'm not going to be outdone by that, right? And so we're like out standing on these logs. God only knows how deep that water was, and we're like fishing around trying to find the fish and the lure. And he ended up losing the fish anyway, and we got the lure back and so forth from all the jumbled logs under the water. And then we paddled down about another 20 yards, and there was the biggest cottonmouth I've ever seen in my life, and that thing just. I mean, and I never thought when we were digging around that water that there was cottonmouth down there.
Absolutely.
That thing was just, it coiled up and its head was up above the water, man. And that thing was about maybe 5 feet in front of us, and we were paddling down. It just turned on us, and it was like a mini standoff in the middle of the river, man.
You're aggressive.
Yeah, they are, and that's what I was afraid of. I didn't know what to do. I had one hand snapping camera shots, and the other hand kind of back paddling back up the river, trying to stay away from it. And the thing actually hit a strainer in and I saw it hitting the strainer. I was like, God, that thing's going to attack us when it hits that strainer. And it startled the snake, and it ended up going up on the bank again. So we kind of avoided some disaster there. But those are just some of the fun things that happen. I guess, having a standoff with a cottonmouth, I guess you'd have to be a Pennsylvania boy like myself to appreciate that fun. But, those are the kind of things that you go for. It's those things that happen along the way when you're going. And that's another tip, too, I'd say. I know I'm getting kind of long-winded here, but enjoy the trip there, too. I always try to stop at weird places. Man, I was going through Tennessee, and I saw this big boot. You got to stop and stop at a big boot, man. I'm telling you. I mean, that thing was like as tall as a building. Okay, when you see a big boot and you're driving down the road, man. So a lot of times I'll actually build some time in, to do things like that. I've seen so many weird things, and you got to stop and just go look at them. Take some pictures, put it on Facebook, because those are the things you go for. Enjoy the ride to the place too.
Right.
Take your pictures, make your memories, if you're there with other fellow anglers and you're making the trip, if you're there with your son or your daughter, or, whoever it is, make some memories along the way, because sometimes you remember that stuff more than the fish that you caught.
Absolutely.
It's just a lot of fun, man.
Absolutely.
That's why I do those trips.
One quick thing, too, that I always point out, though, when you're going on a road trip, if you don't do it very often, be sure if you're going to need a credit card, make sure you call your credit cards and tell them you're going out of town, because you don't want to get to a hotel like happened to me once. We reserved the hotel with our credit card. Then, of course, we didn't tell our credit card company. We got there and we used it for gas, and they canceled the hotel because the credit card was turned off. So
yeah, that actually happened to me, because my son and I drove through, I think it was 5 states within hours, and we stopped almost every state to either eat or get gas.
Yeah.
And so, well, this is another story. I got to tell this one, okay? The Eagle story.
Go
Tell one more story, man. So the stuff that happens to you, okay? So anyway, we're driving to the Walmart to get a fishing license in Alabama, and Tim's in front of me, and I see this red-tailed hawk fly across the road, and it doesn't come out the other side of his car. And he calls me on the phone. He said, "Did you see that hawk?" I said, "Yeah, I saw the hawk." I said, "It flew right in front of you." I said, "Did you hit it?" He goes, "No." He goes, "It's in my boat right now up on the roof." This red-tailed hawk flew and he had his commander upside down. It's like a hybrid kayak, kind of like a canoe. Yeah. It flew up under the bow of the boat and got inside the boat and was riding on top of the bar on his car, like just perched on the bar, but inside the boat.
Nice.
We got to Walmart. And of course, I found out, we were like, well, let's go and buy the license. And that's when I found out that they shut off my bank card, because I went through too many states in one day. So we got that all resolved, got the license, and we got back out there. We thought maybe the hawk would just fly away on its own. No. And so that hawk was still in there, and it wouldn't leave. Like, we kind of banged on the boat and stuff. We actually ended up loosening up the front strap, lifting up the back, and as we lifted it up, he eventually got exposed enough where he just basically flew out. We actually have video of that. If you look on my Facebook page, there's a video. My son was taking the video when that red-tailed hawk flew out of there. So once again, the cool stuff that can happen to you when you go on kayak fishing adventures, man.
Absolutely.
It never ends. It never ends.
Well, we got to roll out. Tell them how they can get in touch with you and follow you on Facebook and everything.
Sure. I have my kayak fishing instruction business and guide business, which is Kayak Fish PA. You can go to kayakfishpa.com to see a little bit about what I do with my courses. My students have been very successful after the course. It's a half kayaking skills because I'm an ACA certified kayak instructor, and then I also teach patterning techniques for smallmouth bass and rivers. Had a ton of guys go through my classes, had a ton of fun with them. They learned a lot. I'm hoping, because they tell me that at least. And so I do that, and you can check me out on Facebook at facebook.com/kayakfishpa. And so everything I do is Kayak Fish PA. You can find me there. And if you want to friend me also individually on Facebook, you certainly can do that. you can search me, not a problem at all. Just make sure you like send me a message or something first, because we're getting lots of like spam stuff. I know, John, you're probably getting like 100 a day, right?
It's miserable.
Exactly, it's miserable. So like message me or something, man, and I'll friend you on Facebook too if you're a kayak angler, especially if you're like holding a fish or you're sitting in a kayak. Those ones are automatics almost, So
Yeah, if your profile photo is some gorgeous half-naked European chick, we're probably not gonna.
yeah, I mean, I have enough of those friends already, John.
God,
I'm trying to slow down on that.
Yeah, I've seen you at shows. You got your fan club. That's cool. Well, thanks for being on, Juan. As always, everybody, be sure follow Juan on Facebook, and of course, be sure to subscribe to the Fishyaker YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and we'll catch you on the water.
Awesome, man. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Juan.